Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa Ely and today I'm going to tell you what representation means to me. And the reason I'm making this video is because I recently read a book that meant a lot to me because it represented me. But I'm also going to talk about some other times I've felt represented in books and other media and just spread a little awareness and maybe commune with my fellow people who feel underrepresented. So the book that prompted this video was Beyond the Black Door by A.M. Strickland. A.M. Strickland is ace, and this is the most on-the-nosed, asexual, sex-repulsed representation I have ever seen in a book, let alone a fantasy. If you've been following my channel for a long time, you'll know that last year I took part in A-Spec April, in which people are encouraged to read books about and by people who are either on the asexual or the aromantic spectrum, or both. There's a lot of crossover, and I read two books. One was about an ace-aro main character and one was about an ace biromantic character. Neither of those characters were sex repulsed. They just had the part of asexuality that means you don't feel attracted to people sexually. They didn't have the part that I have, which is you actually feel disgusted by the idea of taking part in sexual activity and feel extremely uncomfortable with the whole thing coming anywhere near you. Doesn't mean you're uncomfortable with other people doing it, just having it near you. But in this book, the character is sex repulsed, and she is the daughter of someone we find out pretty early on is a sex worker, and it's complicated because she's the very high class type of sex worker who doesn't get direct payment. She can only get like gifts and things because they don't want to call it, because the people who are her clients don't want to admit that she doesn't actually like them, and her adoptive father is in the same line of work, and so she is raised in a situation where she doesn't really have the opportunity to learn a different way to work. And while the mother, who talks to the daughter about it the most, because there are some things you don't want to talk to your adoptive father about, but the mother says that she's not going to try to force her daughter into this line of work, but she also doesn't give her any other options, really. She just says you can do it or not, but then she doesn't give her any other, like, you could be a pianist, or you could be a iron worker, or a farmer. She doesn't really like have other options like that, and so there's a lot of struggling in this main character's life of why she feels this way, because her mother isn't asexual, she's bisexual or pansexual, it seems, and the main character goes through a lot of internalized ace-phobia, not knowing that it's a thing, certainly not knowing that there are other people in the world who are disgusted by it. Like, feeling neutral is one thing, but completely not being able to do it because it's so horrible to you is a whole nother level. Watching her go through that was upsetting, but also very meaningful for me, and it was the first time I'd seen someone feel that way, especially because she is also romantic. I have read, as I said, one book. It was called Let's Talk About Love, where the MC was ace biromantic, but being not sex repulsed, sex was on the table. It just wasn't her preferred thing, but it was on the table, so it's just a different dynamic in a relationship. And so having this main character form romantic feelings for people, but knowing she never wants to have sex with them, is just something that I identify with so much, and I've never seen a fictional character have that before. Fortunately, I have found some people online who have that as well, and I've been able to talk with them, and that's been very relieving and comforting, but it's just a whole nother thing to see it in a traditionally published book that a bunch of my friends are reading and seeing what this is like, and it's just wonderful and amazing to know that this is going to raise awareness of this type of thing, because especially amongst sex repulsed people, asexuals are a lot more socially acceptable than sex repulsed people, because there's a big sex positive movement, and it feels to people who are sex positive that if you go around saying things like, wow, sex sure is gross, isn't it, that you are attacking them. or that you are not being positive towards other people's sexual choices, even though you're just expressing something about how you feel. And even within the ace community, where it's okay to not be sexually attracted to people, there has been, I have seen quite a bit of bullying of sex repulsed people, of saying you need to go to therapy. It's fine to be not interested in sex, but being disgusted by it or scared of it, that's not healthy. You need to change. Which, you know, conversion therapy is super bad, and no, and it's really upsetting to have that suggested, especially by people who should be so aware of what that kind of attitude has done to LGBTQ plus people in the past. So it really means a lot to me to have this normalized in a main character, because one, it is normalized by the ace love interest. It's also normalized by various of the main character's friends. She has a closeted trans friend, and this trans friend is also asexual, possibly sex repulsed. And when she is eventually somewhat forced to come out to people to explain why she doesn't want to be a sex worker, the people who actually forced her to come out, which wasn't very nice, they are also accepting. That's just very meaningful to have other characters in books not suggest therapy or not say there's something wrong with you, and to have multiple ace characters in one story is a really big deal, because often, because we're a very small percentage of the population, it tends to be only one character in a book who is ace or aromantic, and it's very meaningful and special to have ace characters find ace friends and to be treated well by their non-ace friends. So that's about asexuals, but there are other types of representation that are meaningful to me, because I fit into a couple of other minority/marginalized character categories, and one of them is people with anxiety disorders, specifically social anxiety, because that's a little less normalized than other types of anxiety disorders. There are a lot of books about people with PTSD, for example, not all well written and not all good rep, but there's a lot of awareness of it. It feels like there's more awareness of general anxiety disorder and depression, whereas social anxiety is something I haven't seen a lot of rep of. If you know of things that have rep for social anxiety, please tell me below. Also, any other kind of rep that I'm talking about. But specifically, the first time I saw social anxiety represented in media was Lieutenant Barclay from Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I didn't realize it the first time I watched this episode that first introduces the character of Lieutenant Barclay, but the second time I watched it, when I had more come into awareness of myself and how I feel about things, I mean, not to rub my eye, even though it itches a little because I will smudge everything, but I realized the second time I watched Lieutenant Barclay's episode that this is someone like me, especially the thing that set it apart, something that nobody else understood and that was so me, was when Lieutenant Barclay explains to Lieutenant LaForge how he feels, and is explaining not just that he stands in the corner talking to a plant trying to look comfortable, which is very important as a socially anxious person to look comfortable, otherwise people will come over and pity talk to you, which is not a pleasant experience. He also doesn't know what to do with his hands, which is so me. So me. I think I talked about this in my autism video, talking about my symptoms, but part of the whole not learning social skills and body language thing is I don't know what to do with my hands. Like people just, they do things with them. I don't know what they do. Like, I see that they hold them by their sides or they clasp them various places, but for some reason my brain will not tell me which of those things I'm supposed to do in any given moment in a social situation. I know that seems like a weird thing to care about, but Lieutenant Barclay understood, and that meant so much to me. One of the things that's bad about that episode, or discouraging about that episode, is that it is done from the neurotypical's point of view, and has the neurotypicals talking to each other about the socially anxious person who is their problem, because his social anxiety is causing a problem because he can't work normally, because he can't be around people that much. or talk to people about his ideas. And so it kind of, because of the way that the neurotypical characters talk about Lieutenant Barclay, it kind of reinforces the fear that a lot of socially anxious people have, which is, everybody thinks I'm annoying, everybody thinks I'm no good, nobody wants to be my friend, everybody who talks to me nicely is only pitying me, and they all wish I would just go away. Because that's how the neurotypical people actually feel about Lieutenant Barclay. So it's not really crafted for the socially anxious person's viewing. It's more crafted to address how neurotypical people treat socially anxious people, and to tell them, stop treating socially anxious people that way, because the main learning curve is Lieutenant LaForge figuring out that Lieutenant Barclay is actually worthwhile, and he needs to adjust his own attitudes and meet Barclay halfway and not insist that Barclay conform, because he can't. So Guinan is a big part of that episode, because she is not someone who is super into conformity. So she has to give Lieutenant LaForge a talking to about not expecting everyone to think like him, and maybe other people have other problems that he can't understand. Having Guinan encourage good treatment of socially anxious people is very meaningful, and eventually coming around to the point of view that he does have something to offer, he needs support and help, but he is a worthwhile person. He needs to come part way, but you also need to come part way and meet him there. That was very special and meaningful to me, and it was the first time that I actually saw someone else like me in that area. This was before I actually got online and started finding depression and anxiety stuff online and actually diagnosed myself. I've now been diagnosed properly, but a lot of times you have to diagnose yourself and then kind of coach your doctor, because some things your doctor's not going to figure out by himself. But anyway, this was before all that, so finding myself in media was the only way to find myself, because I didn't know the words to use to find other people online with this same issue. And so before I could say I had social anxiety, I could say I'm like Lieutenant Barclay. The thing I figured out most recently that I fit under and would like to see more representation of is autism. I only figured this out almost a year ago now, not quite. I have seen very few autistics in media. There are a few people who are headcanons as autistic, like Sherlock Holmes, several renditions of him, because his social skills are crap and his brain works really not neurotypically. I have now headcanoned various Star Trek characters who, in each show, in each sub-series, they like to have one character who is trying to figure humanity out and doesn't understand and kind of comes from the outside. This being Data in The Next Generation, Odo in Deep Space Nine, and Seven of Nine in Voyager, and Spock in the original series. And it provides kind of a bouncing off point for people to talk about issues and why does humanity do these things this way? Is it really logical, or is it really a good idea? Because this person from outside humanity doesn't think it's a good idea, so we have to actually explain ourselves to this other character so we can talk about social issues. But the way that the whole learning about humanity from the outside thing and not getting a lot of social skills, mainly relying on logic of their own, is a very autistic type of a thing. So those have always been my favorite characters from those shows, partly because they tend to be sort of emotionless on the outside, because that's part of the non-human thing, but then you find out they're super mushy on the inside, and I just like grumpy people who are mushy on the inside. But that too is a bit of an autistic thing, because autistic people have a really hard time expressing their emotions a lot of time, but we also feel very strongly. As I've said, we have very strong empathy, a bit like Vulcans. We have to kind of shut down our emotions because they're too much to deal with. So I've really appreciated having headcanon type autistic traits in various characters in media, but usually they don't have the less socially acceptable autism traits, such as having meltdowns or having sensitivities, sensory issues, what they're called. So they are limited that way. And I would like to see more people with sensory issues depicted in media, and more people who have meltdowns that they can't control, because those are extremely socially unacceptable, and it'd be nice if they were a little more socially acceptable, because they happen and we can't help it. But one show that does show the good and bad sides of autism is The Good Doctor. I would by no means say that The Good Doctor has excellent autism rep, even though the main character is autistic, and that's kind of the whole point of the show. It's not perfect. I assume they have a couple of autistic people working on it, but definitely not perfect. For one, I've never seen a real autistic person talk the way that the main character talks. He talks very, not just stiltedly, but it goes up and down really weirdly while he's talking. Like da 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 da. It's very weird, and I think what the actor is trying to do is to talk in a monotone so that he's not talking the way that neurotypicals talk with the same inflections. I've seen a lot of autistic people talk, and most of them don't talk like that. But it's not perfect because he himself isn't autistic, he's just playing an autistic character. But there are a lot of good points in the rep, some of which are him having meltdowns, but him also being very smart and having a really good logical brain, and being able to, the opposite of aphantasia, being able to visualize things really well. It also shows him having very strong emotions and sometimes being taken in by people because he doesn't understand the purpose of lying, so he doesn't suspect people of lying that much, and also of him cutting off his emotions towards people when they've hurt him, which is what I do a lot. Not a healthy thing necessarily, but it's a thing that we do, and it has been very special to me to get to see that on a show and show him being a functional member of society while still having these drawbacks of having meltdowns and other non-socially acceptable behavior. Those are the things that rep has done for me personally. It also really means a lot to me to read rep of other types of people, other minorities, and because then I get to learn about them and their experiences through their own eyes, and know truthfully how they feel and what their experience is, so I can trust that and not feel like I'm just going off of what the majority thinks these people are like. And so that's very important to me too. Let me know in the comments your favorite books with rep for groups that you yourself fit into, and your favorite books with rep for other groups. And also let me know if you found yourself in media other than the books, like TV shows or movies, like I found with Lieutenant Barclay. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!